The morning alarm buzzed at 6:30 a.m., same as every other Tuesday. Zara Chen rolled over in her narrow dormitory bed, staring at the ceiling tiles she had memorized during countless sleepless nights. 3 water stains shaped like continents she would never visit, 2 cracks that formed a lightning bolt, and 1 loose tile that rattled when transport ships passed overhead. At 17, most students worried about chemistry tests and weekend plans. Zara worried about whether the peace treaty she had negotiated 6 months ago would hold, and if the hegemony forces were really pulling back from the disputed sectors as promised. She sat up slowly, muscle memory from years of military discipline making the movement precise and quiet. Her roommate Sarah still slept soundly, completely unaware that the girl who borrowed her history notes had once commanded 3 million soldiers across 4 star systems. Sarah complained about pop quizzes and cafeteria food. She had no idea that Zara had eaten protein paste in bunkers while enemy artillery shook the walls around her. The shower water ran lukewarm, another reminder of civilian life's small discomforts. In the field, Zara had gone weeks without proper hygiene facilities. Here at Terra Nova Academy, students protested when the hot water ran out. She found their complaints both amusing and oddly comforting. This was what normal teenagers worried about. This was what she was trying to become. Her reflection in the mirror showed a face that looked younger than her years, which had been an advantage in negotiations. Enemies underestimated the small Asian girl with serious dark eyes. They assumed she was a figurehead, a puppet for adult commanders. They learned otherwise when her tactical brilliance left their fleets scattered and their supply lines severed. The scar along her left temple was barely visible now, hidden beneath carefully styled black hair. Reconstructive surgery had removed most traces of the shrapnel that had nearly killed her during the siege of Kepler Station. Her mother had insisted on the surgery, saying Zara needed to look like a normal teenager, not a war veteran. Zara pulled on her academy uniform, the fabric feeling strange after years of battle armor. The clothes were soft, clean, and completely inadequate for stopping plasma fire. She had to consciously stop herself from checking for exits in defensive positions every time she entered a room. Old habits died hard. The walk to breakfast took her past the memorial wall, where names of Academy alumni killed in service were etched in black marble. She knew 17 of those names personally. They had served under her command, trusted her decisions, followed her orders into battles where not everyone came home. The weight of their loss never left her, even now in the safety of an elite civilian school. The dining hall buzzed with typical teenage energy. Students laughed over breakfast, complained about assignments, gossiped about relationships. Zara collected her tray and found her usual spot near the windows, where she could see approaching vehicles and had clear sight lines to all entrances. Strategic thinking was impossible to turn off. "Hey Zara, did you finish the economics paper?" Marcus slid into the seat across from her, textbooks spilling from his overstuffed backpack. He was 18, captain of the debate team, and completely oblivious to anything beyond the academy walls. His biggest stress was maintaining his scholarship grades. "Yes," she replied, picking at her synthetic eggs. She had written extensively about resource allocation and supply chain management, drawing from experiences Marcus could never imagine. Keeping a 1,000,000-person army fed and equipped across multiple worlds taught lessons no textbook could provide. "Want to study together for the history test? I'm struggling with the Colonial War section." Marcus opened his book, pages covered in highlighted notes and scribbled margins. Zara almost smiled. She had fought in the Colonial Wars, commanded ships in battles Marcus was now studying. She knew the real reasons behind political decisions, the classified strategies that would never appear in textbooks. Her former enemy's children might be sitting in this very room, completely unaware of her identity. "Sure," she said. "I know that period pretty well." "Great. Maybe we can grab coffee after classes. There's this new place downtown that The conversation was interrupted by her personal communicator vibrating against her wrist. Only 3 people had this frequency: her mother, her former intelligence chief, and the current Secretary of Defense. None of them contacted her unless something had gone seriously wrong. She glanced at the message display. "Priority Alpha. Report to secure line immediately." Director Santos, her blood turned cold. Priority Alpha meant imminent threat to human space, the kind of crisis that had pulled her from childhood into command of humanity's largest military force. "I have to go," she said, standing abruptly. But we just started talking about the study session. I'll find you later. She was already walking away, her mind shifting into command mode despite her efforts to stay normal. Her steps became measured, purposeful. Students automatically moved out of her way without realizing why. The secure communication booth was hidden in the academy's administrative wing, disguised as a maintenance closet. Her biometric scan opened locks that few students knew existed. Inside, a holographic display activated automatically, recognizing her presence. Director Santos appeared in the blue-tinted projection, his weathered face grim with concern. Behind him, she could see the familiar chaos of the Defense Ministry's war room. Officers moving urgently between workstations, displays showing star maps with ominous red markers. Zara, we have a situation. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet movement in the Omega sector. Unknown configuration, technology we've never seen before. They're heading directly toward the core systems. She felt the familiar weight settling on her shoulders, the burden she had carried since she was 14 years old. How long do we have? 6 weeks, maybe 7 if they stop to refuel. Our current fleet commanders are good, but they don't have your experience with unknown threats. The President is considering reactivating your commission. Zara closed her eyes, seeing herself reflected in the booth's metal walls. A teenage girl in a school uniform, holding the fate of human civilization in her hands once again. She thought of Marcus waiting for their study session, of Sarah sleeping peacefully without knowing aliens might be coming to kill them all. Send me the tactical data, she said quietly. I'll review everything and give you my assessment. And if we need you back in command. The question hung in the air like smoke from distant explosions. Through the booth's small window, she could see students walking to classes, laughing about normal teenage problems, the life she had been trying so hard to build, the normalcy she craved, balanced on the edge of disappearing forever. Give me 12 hours to think about it. The transmission ended, leaving her alone in the small space with the weight of an impossible choice. Zara skipped her next 3 classes, something that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago when she was still adjusting to civilian life. Instead, she found herself in the Academy's observatory, staring up at stars that might soon be battlefields again. The tactical data from Director Santos painted a terrifying picture. The unknown fleet consisted of over 3,000 vessels, each one larger than humanity's biggest dreadnoughts. Their technology showed energy signatures completely outside known physics. Worse, they had appeared seemingly from nowhere, suggesting faster-than-light capabilities that made human hyperspace technology look primitive. Her tablet displayed formation analyses, projected flight paths, and defensive scenarios. Every simulation ended badly for human forces. Current fleet commanders were competent, but they thought in terms of known enemies and familiar tactics. This required something different. You're thinking too loud. Zara turned to find Professor Hayes climbing the observatory stairs, his gray hair disheveled from the wind outside. He taught astrophysics and had been one of the few faculty members who never treated her differently, despite knowing her background. Just studying, she said, minimizing the tactical displays. Since when do you study stellar navigation patterns for a history test? He gestured at her screen before she could close it completely. Those aren't classroom materials, Zara. She remained silent, watching his face as understanding dawned. Professor Hayes had served in the merchant fleet before becoming a teacher. He knew military displays when he saw them. How bad is it? He asked quietly. Bad enough that they're considering pulling me out of school. Professor Hayes sat down beside her on the observation deck's bench. You know, I lost my brother in the Centauri campaign. He served under a young commander who was barely older than these students. That commander brought more soldiers home alive than anyone thought possible. I remember the Centauri campaign. Zara's voice was barely a whisper. I remember every name on the casualty reports. I know you do. That's why you can't stay here pretending to be normal while people die. He stood up, straightening his jacket. Whatever's coming, humanity needs its best defender. After he left, Zara remained on the observation deck as evening approached. Students passed below, heading to dinner and evening activities. Sarah had texted twice asking if she was okay. Marcus had left a note about their postponed study session. Normal people living normal lives. Her communicator chimed again. This time it was her mother. Zara, sweetheart, I heard about the situation. Please tell me you're not considering going back. Dr. Lisa Chen appeared in the holographic display, her face drawn with worry. She worked as a civilian physician now, but had served as a battlefield surgeon during the worst years of the colonial wars. She understood better than most what command had cost her daughter. I haven't decided anything yet. You were a child when they gave you those responsibilities. You've sacrificed enough. Mom, if I don't go and billions die because I was selfish. Selfish. Her mother's voice cracked. Wanting a normal life at 17 isn't selfish, it's human. You've earned the right to be a teenager. Zara looked at her reflection in the darkening window. I don't know how to be just a teenager anymore. Every time I try to care about normal things, I remember what's really at stake out there. Then maybe the answer isn't choosing between being a commander or a normal girl. Maybe it's finding a way to be both. After the call ended, Zara walked back toward the dormitories. The academy felt different now, smaller somehow. Every building, every path reminded her of the world she was trying to protect. These students represented humanity's future, the generation that would inherit whatever universe she helped create. She found Marcus in the library, surrounded by history books and highlighters. He looked up when she approached, concern evident in his expression. There you are. I was worried when you disappeared. Everything okay? Zara sat down across from him, studying his open textbook. The page showed a picture of her at 14, standing beside Admiral Morrison after the victory at Wolf 359. The caption identified her only as an unnamed young officer. The irony wasn't lost on her. Marcus, what do you want to do after graduation? Engineering, probably. My dad wants me to join the family business, but I'm thinking about the colonial terraforming projects. Help build new worlds for people to live on. He gestured at his notes. Reading about these wars makes me want to create instead of destroy, you know? That's a good dream. What about you? You never talk about your plans. Zara traced the edge of the textbook with her finger. I've been thinking about staying in school, maybe studying education. Help kids learn about the universe they're inheriting. It wasn't entirely a lie. The thought had occurred to her during quiet moments when she imagined a future without crisis communications and impossible decisions. You'd be a great teacher. You have this way of explaining things that makes complicated stuff seem simple. If only he knew how complicated her world really was. That night, she lay awake listening to Sarah's gentle snoring and the distant hum of atmospheric processors. Through their small window, she could see ships moving in the traffic lanes between Terra Nova and the orbital stations. Peaceful commerce, families traveling, students heading to other academies, all of it dependent on the fragile peace she had helped create. Her secure communicator remained silent, but she knew Director Santos was waiting for her answer. Fleet commanders across human space were probably developing strategies they hoped they'd never need to use. Politicians were crafting speeches about humanity's determination in the face of unknown threats. But here in this small dormitory room, surrounded by the artifacts of teenage life, our clothes scattered on chairs, study guides taped to walls, photos of friends at academy events, the weight of choice felt heavier than any battlefield command. At 300 hours, she finally admitted to herself what she had known all along. The girl who had saved humanity once couldn't stand by and watch it burn while she studied for history tests. She activated her communicator, typing a short message to Director Santos. Send a transport. I'll brief the senior staff at 0800. Before she could change her mind, she hit send. Sarah stirred in her sleep, mumbling something about morning alarms. Zara looked at her roommate's peaceful face and wondered if she would ever sleep that soundly again. The normal life she had been building was about to end. But perhaps Professor Hayes and her mother were right. Maybe she could find a way to be both the girl who wanted to study for tests and the commander humanity needed. She just had to save the species first, the defense. Ministry's war room hadn't changed in the 6 months since Zara had last stood before its massive holographic displays. The same blue-white glow illuminated faces she recognized from 100 crisis meetings. Some officers nodded respectfully as she entered. Others studied her with curiosity. A few looked skeptical that humanity's fate once again rested with someone who couldn't legally vote in most sectors. Director Santos gestured toward the central display where the unknown fleet moved like a slow-motion avalanche toward human space. Ladies and gentlemen, you all know Commander Chen's record. She's agreed to serve as strategic advisor for this crisis. Advisor? Admiral Reeves stepped forward, his weathered face skeptical. With respect, Director, This is the largest threat humanity has ever faced. We need experienced fleet commanders, not our admiral. Zara's voice carried the quiet authority that had once commanded millions. What's our current defensive posture? Reeves paused, then activated his command tablet. Fleet Group Alpha is moving to intercept at the Sigma Persei system. 300 ships under Admiral Morrison's command. Fleet Group Beta is forming a secondary defense line at Tirar. You're thinking like this is a conventional invasion. Zara studied the tactical display, her mind automatically calculating vectors and timing. These ships appeared without warning in the Omega sector. No sensor ghosts, no hyperspace signatures. They didn't travel here, they just arrived. That's impossible. Even our fastest ships leave detectable traces which means either they have technology we can't comprehend, or they're not from this dimension. She manipulated the display, highlighting energy readings from the alien fleet. Look at these power signatures. They're not just bigger than our ships, they're operating on completely different principles. The room fell silent as officers absorbed the implications. Admiral Morrison, now in his 60s but still sharp, leaned forward from his position at the strategic overview station. If conventional tactics won't work, what do you recommend? Zara had been thinking about this during the transport ride from Terra Nova. We need to assume they can appear anywhere, anytime. Our defensive lines are useless if they can bypass them entirely. She gestured toward the star charts surrounding Earth and the core colonies. Instead of trying to stop them in space, we need to make our worlds impossible to hold. Every colony needs to be prepared for siege warfare. Every citizen needs to be ready to resist occupation. You're talking about abandoning our fleets, Admiral Reeves protested. Our ships are humanity's greatest strength. Our ships are designed to fight enemies we understand. These aren't enemies, they're a force of nature. We need to think like insurgents, not admirals. General Martinez activated his tactical overview. What about the civilian populations? We can't evacuate 40 billion people. We don't evacuate them. We prepare them to survive. Zara's fingers moved across the display, highlighting urban centers and industrial complexes. Every city becomes a fortress. Every factory becomes a weapons plant. Every citizen becomes a soldier. The concept violated every principle of civilized warfare, but Zara had learned long ago that civilization was a luxury armies couldn't always afford. Her strategies during the colonial wars had saved millions of lives precisely because she was willing to sacrifice conventional military thinking. Commander, Director Santos interrupted, we're receiving a communication from the alien fleet. It's being broadcast on all frequencies. The main display shifted to show a transmission unlike anything in human experience. The being that appeared was humanoid but wrong in ways that made the brain struggle to process what it was seeing. Features shifted subtly, as if existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. People of this sector. The voice was perfectly clear despite the visual distortion. We are the collective. Your species has been selected for integration. Resistance will result in unnecessary suffering. Surrender your military assets and prepare for processing. The transmission ended, leaving the war room in stunned silence. Processing, Admiral Morrison said grimly. That doesn't sound like conquest. Zara studied the recorded image, her tactical mind analyzing every detail. They're not trying to rule us. They're trying to absorb us completely. How do we fight something like that? General Martinez asked. The same way humans have always survived impossible odds. We adapt faster than our enemies expect. Zara turned to face the assembled officers. They've made one critical mistake. They announced their intentions. She activated the communication system connecting her to fleet commanders across human space. All commands, this is Strategic Advisor Chen. Implement Scorched Earth Protocol immediately. If we can't hold our territory, we make sure they can't use it either. Admiral Reeves stared at her in shock. You're talking about destroying our own infrastructure. I'm talking about survival. These entities want to process us, which means they need us alive and our infrastructure intact. We deny them both. Over the next 6 hours, orders flowed out to every human world. Industrial complexes received instructions for rigging demolition charges. Agricultural centers prepared to poison their own soil rather than feed invaders. Civilian populations were briefed on resistance protocols that turned ordinary citizens into potential insurgents. It was the most ruthless strategy humanity had ever implemented, and it came from a 17-year-old girl who had learned that sometimes saving a species meant destroying everything it had built. Ma'am, Communications Officer Torres interrupted her planning session. We're receiving reports from the colonies. Some governors are refusing to implement the scorched earth orders. They're calling it mass suicide. Zara wasn't surprised. Politicians thought in terms of preserving what they had built. Military commanders understood that preservation sometimes required destruction. Match me through to the Colonial Council's emergency session. The holographic display showed 24 colonial governors in heated debate. Their voices overlapped in confusion and fear until they noticed Zara's image appearing among them. Governors, she said simply, and the room fell silent. You have 47 hours before the collective reaches your systems. You can spend that time arguing about property values, or you can spend it saving your people's lives. Governor Williams of the Tau Ceti colony spoke first. Commander Chen, with respect, you're asking us to destroy everything our settlers have built over 3 generations. I'm asking you to choose between your buildings and your children. The collective doesn't want to rule your worlds. They want to erase your people from existence and replace them with something that serves their purpose. She manipulated the display to show comparative analyses of the alien fleet's energy outputs. These ships carry enough processing equipment to handle entire planetary populations. They're not coming to conquer, they're coming to harvest. The silence that followed was broken by Governor Martinez of New Brazil. What guarantee do we have that your strategy will work? None, Zara replied honestly. But I can guarantee what happens if we don't try. Every human in this galaxy becomes raw material for their collective. One by one, the governors began authorizing the Scorched Earth protocols. It was the hardest decision any of them had ever made, and Zara felt the weight of forcing that choice upon them. But as reports came in of demolition teams moving to critical infrastructure, of civilian populations being armed and trained for guerrilla warfare, of entire star systems preparing to become uninhabitable, rather than serve alien masters, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. She felt like humanity might actually survive this. The first attack came 36 hours ahead of schedule, shattering every tactical prediction and proving that humanity was facing something beyond conventional understanding. Zara watched the long-range sensors track impossible movements as the collective fleet simply materialized in the Proxima Centauri system, bypassing 3 defensive lines without triggering a single detection grid. Fleet Group Alpha is engaging, Admiral Morrison reported, his voice tight with controlled fear. They're not responding to our weapons fire. The tactical display showed humanity's finest warships unleashing everything they had against the alien vessels. Plasma cannons, quantum torpedoes, antimatter missiles, all of it passed harmlessly through the collective ships as if they weren't entirely present in normal space. They're phasing in and out of our dimensional layer, Zara realized. Watching the energy readings spike and fade in patterns that hurt to analyze. Our weapons can't hit targets that exist partially outside reality. Then how do we fight them? Director Santos demanded. Before Zara could answer, the collective demonstrated their capabilities. One of the massive alien ships extended what looked like tendrils of pure energy toward the human fleet. When the tendrils touched the cruiser UHS Valiant, the ship simply stopped. No explosion, no destruction. It just became motionless in space. Valiant, report status, Admiral Morrison called. The response chilled everyone in the war room. Admiral, this is Captain Torres. Our ship is changing. The hull is reshaping itself. My crew is, God help us, they're still conscious, but they're not human anymore. The transmission cut to static, then resumed with a voice that spoke in perfect unison with thousands of others. Integration proceeding normally. Resistance ceases. We serve the collective. 12 more ships suffered the same fate in less than an hour. Admiral Morrison ordered a retreat, but the collective fleet didn't pursue. They began moving methodically through the Proxima system, approaching each planet with the same terrifying patience. Sir, Communications Officer Torres spoke quietly. We're receiving emergency broadcasts from Proxima Colony. They're implementing Scorched Earth as ordered. The displays showed scenes that would haunt Zara for the rest of her life. Colonists destroying their own farms, their schools, their hospitals. Families saying goodbye as parents stayed behind to operate demolition systems while children evacuated to hidden bunkers. An entire civilization choosing destruction over absorption. It was exactly what she had ordered, and exactly what humanity needed to survive. But watching it happen felt like tearing out her own heart. Commander, Admiral Reeves approached with a grim expression. The political council is demanding an explanation. They're saying this strategy is worse than surrender. Patch me through to them. The emergency session included representatives from across human space, their faces showing fear, anger, and desperation in equal measure. Senator Harrison of the Mars Coalition spoke first. Commander Chen, you've ordered the destruction of everything humanity has built. How is this victory? Because, Senator, victory isn't keeping our buildings intact. Victory is ensuring that in 50 years, human children still exist to build new ones. She activated tactical displays showing the collective's integration process. Every person they capture becomes part of their network. Every facility they control becomes a processing center for more humans. If we let them take our worlds intact, they'll use our own infrastructure to consume our entire species within a generation. Representative Kim from the Europa settlements raised her hand. But surely there must be some way to negotiate. They don't negotiate, Zara interrupted. They process. They've done this to other species before us. We've detected the remains of at least 40 different civilizations that tried diplomacy with the collective. All that's left of them are their integration signatures in the alien ship's data cores. The revelation stunned the Council into silence. Humanity wasn't the first species to face this threat, but they might be the first to understand what they were really fighting. Then what you're proposing is our only option? Senator Harrison asked. No, sir. It's our best option. Our only option would be complete surrender and hoping the integration process is quick. Over the following days, reports poured in from across human space as the collective's advance continued. The aliens moved with methodical precision, appearing in system after system without warning. Each time, human fleets engaged and were systematically converted or destroyed. Each time, planetary populations implemented scorched earth protocols that left their worlds burning, but unconquerable. The strategy was working, but at a cost that made Zara question everything she thought she knew about command. On New Shanghai, she watched families detonate their own homes rather than let them serve alien masters. On Kepler 442b, she saw children as young as 12 operating guerrilla cells because the adults were all dead or converted. Ma'am, Officer Torres interrupted her review of casualty reports. We have an update from the science teams analyzing collective technology. They think they've found something important. Dr. Elizabeth Warren appeared on the holographic display, her face drawn with exhaustion but her eyes bright with discovery. Commander, we've been studying the energy signatures from the integration process. The collective ships aren't just phasing between dimensions. They're borrowing power from somewhere else. What kind of power source? We think they're tapping into the quantum vacuum itself, drawing energy from the space between particles. But here's the critical part. The process requires absolute synchronization across their entire fleet. If we could disrupt that synchronization, their ships would lose dimensional coherence, Zara finished. They'd become vulnerable to conventional weapons. Exactly. But we'd need to generate a quantum interference pattern across multiple star systems simultaneously. The power requirements are enormous. Zara studied the tactical display, her mind racing through possibilities. What about using our own destroyed infrastructure? All those demolished power plants and orbital stations? They're still generating quantum emissions as they decay. Dr. Warren's expression changed as she grasped the implications. If we could coordinate the timing of the demolitions, create synchronized quantum pulses across multiple systems, we turn our own destruction into a weapon. It was the most insane strategy Zara had ever conceived, requiring perfect timing across hundreds of light years and the sacrifice of everything humanity had built in 3 centuries of expansion. But as she watched another human fleet fall to the collective's integration beams, she knew it was their only chance. Dr. Warren, I need precise calculations for quantum pulse generation. Director Santos, contact every surviving colony and fleet commander. Admiral Morrison, prepare for the most complex military operation in human history. She paused, looking around the war room at faces that had come to trust her impossible decisions. We're going to turn the entire human sphere into a weapon. If this works, we save our species. If it fails, we die as humans instead of living as something else, Admiral Morrison finished. I've seen the integration recordings, Commander. Death is preferable. As orders began flowing out to coordinate humanity's final gambit, Zara found herself thinking about her dormitory room at Terra Nova Academy, about Marcus worrying over history tests and Sarah sleeping peacefully through the night, about the normal life she had been trying so hard to build. Maybe if this worked, she could go back to that life. Maybe she could learn to be just a teenager studying for exams instead of a commander, orchestrating the destruction of civilization to save the species. But first, she had to make sure there would still be a human species left to save. The countdown to Operation Prometheus began 72 hours before the collective fleet would reach Earth's outer defense perimeter. Across 47 star systems, human survivors prepared to detonate the remnants of their civilization in perfect synchronization, creating a quantum interference wave that would either save humanity or scatter their atoms across the galaxy. Zara hadn't slept in 3 days. The coordination required for the operation was beyond anything attempted in military history. Each demolition had to occur at precisely calculated intervals to create overlapping quantum pulses. A single timing error would collapse the interference pattern and leave the collective fleet unaffected. "Commander," Dr. Warren's voice crackled through the communication system from her bunker on Titan. "We're getting reports of technical difficulties from the Vega system. Their quantum generators are showing instability." "How bad?" "If they explode early, the cascade effect could trigger premature detonations across 12 other systems. We'd lose a third of our pulse sources." Zara studied the complex timing charts that covered every surface of the war room. Red lines showed dependencies between systems, where failure in one location would compromise others. It was like watching a house of cards balanced on the edge of collapse. "Can we reroute the synchronization through the Centauri relay?" "Maybe, but it would require manual control from someone actually in the system. The AI systems aren't sophisticated enough to handle the quantum calculations in real time," which meant someone would have to stay behind in a doomed system to ensure the timing remained precise. Zara felt the familiar weight of command decisions that cost lives to save more lives. "I'll go." Admiral Morrison's voice came from behind her. "Centauri was my first command. Seems fitting it should be my last." "Admiral, Commander, I'm 63 years old. I've served my species for 4 decades. If staying behind means my granddaughter might have a future, that's not a sacrifice. That's a privilege." Before Zara could respond, alerts began flooding the communication system. The collective fleet had accelerated again, moving faster than their previous calculated speed. "Sir," Officer Torres called out, "long-range sensors show the alien fleet will reach Earth in 18 hours, not 72. They're moving through space-time distortions we can't even detect properly." The carefully planned timeline collapsed. Operation Prometheus, which required precise coordination across multiple star systems, now had to be executed with less than a day's notice. "Get me all system commanders," Zara ordered. "Emergency priority." Within minutes, holographic figures appeared around the war room while colonial governors, fleet admirals, resistance leaders broadcasting from hidden bunkers. Some faces showed exhaustion, others determination. All of them looked to her for guidance. "Ladies and gentlemen, the collective has accelerated. We implement Prometheus in 18 hours or not at all. I know this isn't the timeline we planned for, but Commander," Governor Chen of New Beijing interrupted. "Half our demolition teams are still setting charges. They need at least 36 hours to complete the quantum pulse generators. Then they work in shifts and finish in 18. Ma'am, with respect, the human body can't maintain that level of precision under extreme time pressure. One mistake in the quantum calibrations will kill everyone in that system," Zara finished. "I understand the stakes, Governor, but if we don't try, the collective kills everyone in every system." Admiral Santos from the Outer Rim colonies leaned forward. "What about partial implementation? If only some systems are ready, could we still disrupt their synchronization?" Dr. Warren's voice came through the speakers. "Possibly, but the effect would be limited. We might make a few of their ships vulnerable, but not the entire fleet." "A few ships are better than none," Admiral Morrison pointed out. "If we can prove they're not invincible, human morale might survive even if we don't." Zara looked at the tactical display showing the collective's inexorable advance. Every hour of delay meant more human worlds would fall. Every system that failed to complete their preparations meant fewer options for humanity's survival. All systems will proceed with Prometheus on the accelerated timeline. Any location that can't complete full preparations will implement partial measures. We make our stand with whatever we have. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of frantic preparation. Across human space, demolition teams worked around the clock to complete quantum pulse generators. Engineers improvised solutions with spare parts and desperation. Civilian volunteers operated equipment they barely understood, because the trained technicians were dead or converted. Zara found herself thinking about chaos theory, how small changes could cascade into massive effects. A single loose connection in the Vega system could doom humanity's last hope. A power fluctuation on New Shanghai could save or destroy an entire species. "Ma'am," Communications Officer Torres approached with a personal message tablet. This came through the civilian channels from Terra Nova Academy. The message was from Marcus. "Hey Zara, heard you were helping with the crisis. Hope you're staying safe. When this is all over, we still have that history test to study for. Don't forget you promised to help me understand the colonial wars." She almost laughed at the absurdity. If Operation Prometheus failed, there wouldn't be any history tests. There wouldn't be any students to take them. The innocent normalcy of his message highlighted everything she was fighting to preserve. 1 hour to implementation, Dr. Warren announced. All systems report ready status. Though I should note that ready is a relative term given our time constraints. The war room fell silent except for the hum of quantum computers calculating precise timing sequences. 47 human worlds prepared to destroy themselves to wound an enemy that barely acknowledged their existence. "Commander," Admiral Morrison's voice came from the Centauri system. "I want you to know it's been an honor serving under your command. You've made impossible decisions and somehow kept humanity alive. Whatever happens in the next hour, you've already saved more lives than anyone could have imagined." Other voices joined in, our governors, admirals, resistance leaders who had watched their worlds burn, rather than surrender to integration. They had followed her orders knowing it meant sacrificing everything they had built, trusting that a 17-year-old girl understood something about survival that they had missed. 30 seconds to initiation, Dr. Warren announced. Zara watched the countdown timer reach 0, knowing that in the next few minutes, she would either go down in history as humanity's savior or as the teenager who convinced an entire species to commit spectacular suicide. The first quantum pulse erupted from the ruins of New Shanghai, followed in precise sequence by detonations across 46 other systems. For a moment that lasted eternity, the quantum structure of local spacetime shimmered like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Then the universe held its breath, waiting to see if human ingenuity and desperation were enough to wound gods. The quantum interference wave spread across human space at the speed of thought, a ripple in reality itself that touched every atom between Earth and the farthest colonies. For 17 seconds, the fundamental structure of space-time trembled as 47 simultaneous explosions synchronized their quantum signatures into a weapon that existed more in mathematics than in the physical world. Zara watched the sensor, displays with the intense focus that had once guided million-ship fleets through impossible battles. The collective vessels, caught mid-phase between dimensions, began to flicker like old holographic projections with failing power supplies. "It's working." Dr. Warren's voice cracked with exhaustion and disbelief. "Their dimensional coherence is destabilizing. The ships are becoming solid. For the first time in the war, human weapons found their targets. The surviving elements of Fleet Group Alpha, reduced to barely 30 ships, opened fire with everything they had. Plasma bolts that had passed harmlessly through collective vessels now tore through alien hulls like tissue paper. The first enemy ship to die exploded in a cascade of exotic matter that painted new constellations across the darkness. Then another. Then dozens as human forces throughout the galaxy finally had targets they could actually hit. But the victory came at a price that made Zara's chest tighten with grief she couldn't afford to feel. The quantum pulse had worked by using the destruction of human infrastructure as a weapon, and that destruction was real. 47 star systems had essentially been sterilized to create 17 seconds of vulnerability. "Commander," Admiral Morrison's voice came from the Centauri system, weaker now but still determined. "The pulse generators are burning out. We've got maybe 3 more minutes before the collective regains dimensional coherence. All fleets, this is command. You have 3 minutes to eliminate as many targets as possible. After that, we're back to conventional warfare against unconventional enemies." The next 3 minutes redefined the meaning of desperate. Human ships that had been fleeing in terror turned to attack with suicidal courage. Civilian vessels armed with mining lasers rammed alien cruisers. Space stations turned their construction equipment into improvised weapons. Every human in the galaxy understood they were witnessing either salvation or humanity's final battle. When the quantum interference finally collapsed, the tactical situation had transformed. The collective fleet had lost nearly 800 vessels, almost a quarter of their total force. More importantly, humanity had proven the aliens could be hurt. But the cost was devastating. The quantum pulses had rendered 47 systems uninhabitable for decades. Billions of humans were homeless refugees with nowhere to go. Earth's orbital infrastructure was crippled, the colonies were in ruins, and the military had been reduced to scattered survivors hiding in deep space. "Status report," Zara called out, though she dreaded the answers. "We've got approximately 2 million survivors in the Sol system," Director Santos reported. "Maybe 8 million scattered across other systems. Total human population is now less than 50 million, down from 43 billion. The numbers hit like physical blows. 43 billion people reduced to 50 million in less than a week. It was genocide on a scale that defied comprehension, and it had happened under her command while she was trying to save them." "Commander," Communications Officer Torres approached hesitantly, "we're receiving a transmission from the collective fleet. It's different from their previous communications. The holographic display activated, but instead of the multi-dimensional entity that had demanded surrender, a human face appeared. Captain Maria Santos of the converted cruiser UHS Valiant looked directly at the camera with eyes that held intelligence, but no longer held anything recognizably human. "Zara Chen," the voice was Captain Santos's, but it spoke with the collective consciousness of the alien fleet. "We acknowledge your tactical innovation. The quantum interference weapon was unexpected. You have earned the right to negotiation. I thought you didn't negotiate. We adapt. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that make total integration inefficient. We offer alternative terms." Zara felt a chill that had nothing to do with the war room's temperature. "What terms?" "Surrender 70% of your remaining population for integration. The remainder will be permitted to exist as they are, confined to a single star system under our supervision. You will be allowed to maintain your biological and cultural identity as a preserved specimen." The offer hung in the air like a poison cloud. Save 15 million humans by sacrificing 35 million to alien absorption. Keep a fragment of humanity alive by accepting permanent imprisonment in a cosmic zoo. I need time to consider. You have 1 hour. Refuse our terms and we will resume total integration. Your quantum weapon cannot be used again without destroying your own species completely. The transmission ended, leaving the war room in stunned silence. Around the table, the faces of humanity's surviving leaders showed the weight of an impossible choice. "We can't accept," Admiral Morrison's voice came through the communication system. "Trading most of our people for the survival of a few isn't preservation, it's slow extinction. But if we refuse, they'll kill everyone," Governor Chen pointed out. "At least this way some humans survive." "As pets," General Martinez spat. "Preserved specimens for alien entertainment." Zara studied the tactical displays, her mind racing through possibilities. The collective was right about one thing. Operation Prometheus couldn't be repeated. Humanity had literally destroyed their ability to generate another quantum interference weapon. But they had also proven something critical. The collective is afraid, she realized suddenly. "What?" Director Santos looked at her in surprise. "They're afraid of us. If they weren't, they wouldn't offer terms. They'd just continue the integration until we were all absorbed." She manipulated the tactical display, highlighting the remaining collective ships. "Look at their formation. They're maintaining distance from our surviving fleets. They're worried we might have other surprises." "Do we?" Admiral Morrison asked. "No, but they don't know that." A plan began forming in Zara's mind, built from desperation and the kind of strategic thinking that had made her famous among enemy commanders and infamous among her own forces. It was insane, impossible, and completely against every principle of military strategy. It was also humanity's only chance. "Get me Dr. Warren. And patch me through to every surviving human in the galaxy. Emergency broadcast all frequencies." "Commander, what are you planning?" Director Santos asked. Zara looked at the faces around her, these leaders who had trusted her with their species' survival. "I'm going to convince the collective that 50 million desperate humans are more dangerous than 40 billion comfortable ones." "How?" "By making them an offer they can't afford to accept. The emergency broadcast reached every surviving human in the galaxy simultaneously, carried by quantum entanglement communicators that had survived the destruction of conventional infrastructure. 50 million refugees scattered across deep space stations and hidden colonies heard Zara's voice echo through their emergency shelters. Citizens of humanity, she began, her words reaching desperate families huddled in transport ships and wounded soldiers, manning improvised defensive positions. The collective has offered us terms. They want to preserve 15 million of us as specimens while integrating the rest into their consciousness. Pause. Let them absorb the horror of the choice. I'm here to tell you that we will not accept these terms. We will not surrender 35 million human beings to save the rest, and we will not become a zoo exhibit for alien entertainment. In the war room, Director Santos looked at her with concern. They had already decided to reject the collective's offer, but Zara's tone suggested something far more radical. Instead, she continued, I'm making a counteroffer, not to the collective, but to you. Every human still breathing in this galaxy. She activated the tactical display showing the positions of surviving human forces, scattered ships, hidden bases, refugee convoys, the broken remnants of a civilization that had spanned hundreds of worlds. The collective fears us. They fear what 50 million desperate humans might accomplish if pushed to absolute extremes. They should fear us, because we're not just going to survive this war, we're going to win it. Commander, Admiral Morrison's voice came through the communication system. With respect, we don't have the resources to continue fighting. Our fleets are destroyed, our worlds are uninhabitable. Our fleets are destroyed, our worlds are gone, and our population has been reduced to almost nothing, Zara agreed. Which means we have nothing left to lose. And humans with nothing to lose are the most dangerous creatures in the universe. She manipulated the display to show the collective fleet's current position, still maintaining distance from human forces. The enemy has given us the greatest gift they could possibly offer. They've made us desperate. How is that a gift? Governor Chen asked. Because desperate humans don't follow rules. Desperate humans innovate. They adapt. They find solutions that comfortable humans would never consider. Zara's voice carried the confidence that had once convinced 3 million soldiers to follow her into impossible battles. The collective has studied other species they've absorbed. Those species fought conventionally, predictably. They tried to preserve what they had built. She gestured toward the star chart showing the devastation of human space. We've already lost everything we built. So now we can fight without worrying about collateral damage, without worrying about casualties, without worrying about anything except making the enemy regret they ever found us. The plan she outlined over the next hour was madness disguised as strategy. Every surviving human ship would be converted into a weapon. Not just a weapon carrying weapons, but a weapon itself, ramming attacks guided by human pilots who knew they wouldn't survive the impact. Suicide runs against collective vessels using improvised antimatter explosives. Biological warfare using human pathogens that might disrupt the integration process. You're asking us to become something we've never been? Dr. Warren protested. Humanity has always valued life, tried to minimize casualties here. Humanity has always adapted to survive, Zara corrected. When we lived in caves, we learned to use fire. When we reached the stars, we learned to navigate hyperspace. Now we learn to be the kind of species that aliens fear to fight. What about the civilians? The children? Every civilian becomes a combatant. Every child old enough to understand warfare becomes a soldier. We don't have the luxury of protecting non-combatants when our entire species is facing extinction. The counteroffer she transmitted to the collective an hour later was unlike anything in the history of interstellar diplomacy. Instead of surrender or negotiation, it was a promise of eternal war. To the collective consciousness, she began, her image transmitted across space to the alien fleet. Humanity rejects your terms. We offer our own. Leave our galaxy immediately, or we will make your integration of our species so costly that you'll spend the next 1,000 years regretting you ever found us. The multidimensional entity that responded showed signs of something that might have been confusion. You cannot threaten us with 50 million survivors. Your military capacity is negligible. Our conventional military capacity is negligible, Zara agreed. But conventional warfare assumes both sides want to survive the conflict. We've moved beyond that assumption. She activated a display showing the positions of human survivor groups. You want to integrate us? Come try. But understand that every human you approach will attempt to kill as many of your ships as possible before dying. We'll ram our transports into your vessels. We'll detonate our power cores in proximity to your fleets. We'll turn our own bodies into biological weapons if necessary. This is irrational. You cannot win through suicide attacks. Now, we don't need to win through suicide attacks. We just need to make the cost of integrating us higher than the benefit you gain from our absorption. Zara leaned toward the camera, her teenage face showing the kind of cold calculation that had made enemy admirals reconsider their career choices. How many of your ships is the integration of humanity worth? 100? 1,000? 10,000? For the first time since the war began, the collective entity seemed genuinely uncertain. You will destroy yourselves to spite us. We'll destroy ourselves to remain ourselves. The question is, how many of you will we take with us? The negotiation that followed lasted 6 hours and redefined the concept of diplomatic brinkmanship. The collective offered increasingly generous terms: partial integration, technological exchange, territorial concessions, while Zara countered with increasingly specific descriptions of how 50 million humans would make the conquest as expensive as possible. Finally, the alien consciousness made an offer that surprised everyone in the war room. We withdraw from this galaxy. Your species maintains independence. In exchange, you agree to remain within your current territorial boundaries for 1,000 years. 500 years, Zara countered, and we get to keep all the technology we developed during that time. Agreed. Just like that, the war ended. Not with humanity's victory, but with humanity's promise to be too expensive to defeat. 3 months later, Zara sat in a prefabricated classroom on New Terra, the hastily constructed colony that would serve as humanity's temporary capital while they rebuilt civilization. Her students were refugee children learning about the war they had barely survived, taught by the teenager who had saved them all. But teacher, asked 10-year-old Maria, whose parents had died in the Vega system's evacuation, why did the aliens leave? We were so much smaller than them. Zara looked out the window at the construction crews building new homes for human survivors. In the distance, she could see the orbital shipyards where engineers were already designing vessels that incorporated lessons learned from fighting impossible enemies. Because, Maria, sometimes being small doesn't mean being weak. Sometimes it means being too stubborn to quit, too clever to predict, and too dangerous to ignore. Her personal communicator chimed with a message from Marcus, now serving as a colonial engineer on New Shanghai 2. Hey Zara, heard you're teaching now. Guess you found a way to help kids understand history after all. P.S. Still want to study for that test when I get back? She smiled, remembering the girl who had worried about chemistry exams and cafeteria food. That girl was gone, replaced by someone who understood that growing up sometimes meant saving the species first and figuring out how to be normal afterward. But maybe, Zara thought as she watched her students work on their lessons about courage and adaptation, being normal was overrated anyway. Maybe humanity's future belonged to the children who would grow up knowing that 50 million desperate humans had convinced gods to find easier prey. Maybe that was the most human thing of all,